My name is Pieter. Actually, my real name is Pieter Willie Richard Kohnstam. I was born in Amsterdam in 1936, the Netherlands. Go back the ancestry to 1600 in the area of Nuremberg Fürth. Fürth is a little town, well, not so little if you speak to them, but outside of Nuremberg. And the family was in the toy merchandising and other goods business. It was a fairly large company with offices in Germany, London, and Czechoslovakia. My father was an artist. I wanted to be an artist. And he was quite an accomplished artist. The arrangement was made between him and his dad that he would study art if as long as he would also work in the company in some function, which he did. My mother came from another town in Bavaria. Her father had been an officer in the German army, killed during the First World War. My name, Richard, my middle name, Richard. And we saw his grave hiding and fleeing when we were in Little France at the end of 1942. My mother had never met the father, the daughter. He was a kindergarten Montessori teacher. My grandmother, maternal side, her name Clara. Well, not in our apartment.
No.
But in the building there were other people. I didn't know all the people. I knew somebody living upstairs from us. She was, I think she was in education, something. And then our next door neighbors, who my grandmother became very friendly with because the lady there, who was about her age, very old, I retraced her one day. I think she must have been in her early 50s. But for a little kid, that was. So they played bridge every night. And eventually, they were all machine gunned and killed, except one girl that was able somehow to. I think my mother was the more friendly and connected with the France. There was a parallel between the Franks and the Kohnstams, middle upper class families from wealthy backgrounds, cultured, German education, etc. The Franks had relationships in banking and so on. And my family was in the merchandising toy business. And my mother became very friendly with Edith Frank. And when she met Anna, my mother was a gregarious, charming, knew many languages person, interested in cosmetics and fashion, which helped her during the occupation when Jewish people couldn't just go to work anymore, and she was helping a very good friend who had two dress stores. also German, but Christian Germans. And she would earn money under the table, designing and modeling clothes. And Anna was interested in artists, cosmetics. So the two of them hit it off. They had fun together, and she became my babysitter and guardian. She was in our apartment almost daily. The diary came later as a diary, because what she was doing before she had the diary, well, you want to know the story, how the diary came about? Okay, I'll tell you. Because Edith was complaining to my mother that Anna was leaving the papers strewn all over the apartment. And that was not sitting well with Edith. It was proper, everything had to be in its place. So Anna's birthday was approaching, June 12, 1942. And my mother made a suggestion to her, like, just chatting, why don't you consider buying her a diary? Well, for her birthday, June 12th, 13 years old, she got the diary by her father, who brought it for dinner or whatever. Naturally, at that time, who would have thought that all of this would one day become a world-renowned bestseller? So it was a great street. People were friendly on the streets and town, and how cute you are, and giving you candy or this or that, etc. That all stopped gradually. By the time, I'll tell you something about history now. By the time that America got involved in the war, Pearl Harbor, but England had already been on long discussions with President Roosevelt and others. America was not very much prone to help what was happening already to Jewish people and to arm the Allies or the British. But by the time we joined the war, about 1.5 million people had already been sent to concentration camps, and many had been killed. So what changed drastically also was the regulations that were being imposed almost daily, but one of them, to wear the Star of David in the outside of your whatever garments you were wearing. These were handmade, homemade, crudely fabric, yellow gold. In the middle stitch, the word Jew in the language of which the Axis had occupied the country. For the first time, a society was forced to separate. What that created was a discrimination, a separation of society. People were no longer nice and good, whatever. They would insult, demean, spit, club, kick, and I can stay here and tell you all kind of examples that my wife won't let me tell you because they're too graphic. The invisible enemy that very few people talk about betrayal. Within families, in families, the German youth accusing their own families. They all started to disappear. Nobody played in the streets anymore. That's all gone. I saw the flatbed trucks daily. Some were naked people. These were not concentration camp prisoners being transported away. Mothers with the kids hanging on their feet, legs, or dresses if they were dressed, sick, ill, in the middle of snow or not. And it was weekly or so, or less, that suddenly neighborhoods became empty. Well, you have to understand that there was this was a gradual audiovisual. How did that all impact? And to see these people being demeaned and killed and kicked or shot. I had a neighborhood friend who was apprehended, put against the wall, to betray 15, 20 people standing there because the Nazis wanted to get the information who they were Jewish or not, or what they were doing. And he pulled out an orange handkerchief, said something in Dutch against the Germans and was machine gunned. And the others were to cut it away. So these gradual pictures, and we got raided in our home too. Thanks God it didn't do anything. I told you, our neighbors, they were raided twice, machine gunned down everybody except the young girl, who was, we had some letters, the letter, the last time we went to Amsterdam about five years ago. How did that make you? Betrayals and the killing of trust. You now have to look over your shoulder, not knowing who you could trust or not. Who in the store, if you want to buy something, whom you may have known, would betray you. At some point in 1942, people in Amsterdam started to get orders, in our case, in our street in Amsterdam, to be at a railroad station in Amsterdam at midnight one night in June of 1942. That list, that order with a number, ordered by the Nazi occupation forces, Mr. Uruguay. In that sense, we now have to go to that station. We were to be transported to Westerbork. It is still a prison, place where they gathered people raised in it, which was not a concentration camp per se. It was a prison for forced labor, from where weekly transports of about 1,000 people in trains were being either transported to Auschwitz or Theresienstadt. My father claims we were to be sent to Theresienstadt in these freight cars. And I refused to mention this, that we were cattle cars. There were no cattle cars. We were people, humans, in freight cars. These were not cattle cars. So, well, yes, in a way. The synagogue of my parents in Nuremberg got destroyed. As far as Amsterdam is concerned, and again, I was a young kid and so on, to be honest with you, we had a Kohnstam Kristallnacht because we weren't, the few times during occupation that my mother could take me in a tram to babysit me, which is what she used to do when I became a little. I needed something because it became a pain. Suddenly you saw all these many stores painted with demeaning signs, and you heard it. So this was very visible. And then naturally you had the noise of the machine guns, shootings, raids, bombing of airplanes. A meeting was held in our apartment, very rushed. My parents, my grandmother, and a doctor in the neighborhood, who also sought me here because we had, one day my father brought a super scooter, scooter. Again, Anna got wind of it, so we had to go use it immediately. And we went across the street, and a bad maneuver, and we fell, and a lot of blood, and a lot of things. And we couldn't go to hospitals anymore. The nurses and doctors were already gone to war, or the Jews had already been imprisoned. So what do? The doctor sewed me up, and now I have a souvenir of Anne Frank. But so we didn't have a training in the sense and preparation once you were fleeing like this. Now, my parents had to leave within, my father had to leave within 15 minutes. My mother joined them the next day. Nobody was prepared for this. Nobody knew how long this was going to last. And for some, like my father, and to a point my grandmother a little bit, my father, like many others, we are Germans, we are not leaving. Look what we did, we are here. We paid our taxes, we did all these things. During this meeting, which was again very emotional, a heart-wrenching kind of situation of families knowing that the worst was to come and not knowing what was to come and when and where, and to say a goodbye. During the meeting, my grandmother came up with two thoughts. One, that if we were going to stay, which was an option, she were going to close the apartment, turn on the gas, and blow the apartment up. After that meeting, the decision was reached that we were going to leave. In fact, the doctor committed suicide a few days later because he wasn't going to be transported away. My parents called a very good family friend, Christian Germans, who owned two dress stores, one in Amsterdam, one in Maastricht. Maastricht is about 2 hours southwest of Amsterdam by train. She came up with a very clever plan. My mother, who was involved as a hobby in fashion and etc., and my father was an artist. So she planned a mock, make-believe, fashion show in Maastricht in her store. My mother was supposed to be the model, and my father was the designer of the clothes. With this person, Gerda Leske, coming with us on the train ride. She was putting her life on the line, making believe she was my mother. I was not allowed to recognize anybody on that train ride to Maastricht. And so that is the first stretch on the border to Belgium. We had been invited, my family, to hike with them, which at that time was a big secret because nobody knew they were building or having an annex. But there were many reasons, and again, Susan can give you a presentation on that, why we did not decide to take that option, that invitation. The last time that I remember seeing Anna turning around and waving and on the street and this and that, I knew that was the end of the story, even as a young kid. We were already conditioned, imbued with all these sufferings and things we had seen and etc. And that were being inflicted on us and on the people. It was 1,100 miles to Barcelona. It took us 10 months, mostly walking. There were some train rides, some old buses, smoking and making noise. And there wasn't any gas. So you had to be very clever what you filled in the engines to make them run. But we lived under the stars, dressed as farmers. It was a very dangerous, involved. Belgium, France, and Spain. I went with my mother, and my father went by himself. Generally, as we were fleeing from then on, I went with my father, not with my mother. So he was my babysitter. My mother, as I said, she made all the arrangements. She knew the languages. She was charming, brilliant. I mean, she made the floor wherever she went. Worked for the underground, the Free France, in France, while it was still Free France. And we always had places to go that were predetermined, prearranged, and the times were prearranged. Whenever we got through the fleeing or through, even on the streets or something, we knew where to go, and that's where we met at some point during the day or evening. Well, in Europe it was eventually the entire flight escape led us to Barcelona. Oh, about 3 months. So we didn't have much youth in those days. You grew up quick. You had to. Now don't forget, my parents had to flee in 1933, and the second time in 1942. Their lives shot. All these ambitions and things, and all these upper class families, and all that, everything destroyed. So, that's about it. But again, I'm going to get involved. Yeah, there was a man who, nobody used the real name, so he must have used a false name. Apparently he must have been, he was working for a Jewish agency, so my father drawing something from Barcelona. We started a nice chat. And eventually he asked us to go to the chief of police of Barcelona, who then, listening to us, made an appointment with the Bishop of Barcelona. And that started our entire thing. I was there 20 years. I grew up in Argentina. For the second time. So let's go back and talk when we had that meeting in Amsterdam and we were leaving. My mother took a few minutes after that and spoke with the milkman and made an arrangement. We had different Delft things. I don't know if you know what Delft is. So she said, when the teapot is up, it's fine. When the teapot is down, that's the code. Pick up my mother and take her. Would you do that? And he agreed. And he wouldn't take any money. So one day, my grandmother, so we left. But, and took her in his cart, hiding things under hay or whatever he had, and whatever, and took her to some place. Now, for 2 years, my grandmother hid in Amsterdam. And that is why I said, who were these heroes? There were others who were not. There were opportunists who killed you. Anyway, to make a long story short, 1945. She said they were British, but it could have been Canadians who parachuted into where she was staying, hiding. And she was an avid bridge player. So, they were playing bridge. One was an officer, another soldier, whoever, and my grandmother and somebody else. So my grandmother was partnering with the officer, so grand slam. So he gets so excited, he told her that he would do anything for her. Well, we are now in 1945. We had left, escaped in 1942. And she lost quite a few people in Auschwitz, and other family went to the Philippines and Shanghai, which you may have heard recently. Most of them also died. So my grandmother told this young man, or not a young man, he said, I want you to write a letter. I'm going to give you a letter. Could you make sure my cousin gets it in London? I'm in Buenos Aires now with my stepfather one nice morning, and the phone rings. And my stepfather yells out in excitement, Grandma is alive. So, I'm getting a little emotional. So, that then produced a reconnection of the family. And eventually she came to Argentina on an airplane in 1945 or 46. By a ship. The people that were immigrating needed to prove baptism and to have to show a certificate of baptism. We got it without having to be baptized. There were some famous people on the ship, and spies, and Gestapo, and quite a few Jewish people who without papers and much anything were immigrating to a free world. Well, I have one wife, a daughter and a son, and 3 grandchildren. There will be peace in the world, and to see all of those who were massacred to come alive again. I would like to leave something for the young people. Betty knows this. Not to be indifferent. Indifference is a dangerous weapon. And denying the truth, added to that, is a very dangerous combination.